For 50 years, Polaroid owned instant photography. Tens of thousands of employees, cameras in homes all over the world, and one deep belief at the top. People will always want a photo they can hold in their hand. And they were right about that. They were wrong that instant film was the only way to get one. Digital cameras arrived, then phones with cameras, and by 2001, Polaroid had filed for bankruptcy. Nobody there was bad at making instant film. They were the best in the world at it. The ground they were standing on just moved, and they kept standing on the old ground.
And here is the thing about your project, true in biology and business alike. It never runs in a sealed room. It runs inside a living system, regulations, technology, competitors, an economy, public opinion, and every one of those is moving while you build. You can hit every milestone, land on budget, satisfy every requirement, and still ship something the world stopped needing around month 4. On time and on target is not the same as still worth doing. That gap is the whole skill.
Liam here, and I want to sit in the confused seat for a second because my gut says this isn't my job. My read is the project manager builds what the charter says, and whether the market shifts is somebody else's problem. Up in strategy, where's the line? Why does the outside world land on my desk?
Because the project is where the money is actually being spent right now. Think of the project manager as the organization's early warning radar, not its general. You're the closest set of eyes to the work, so you're the first one positioned to notice the ground shifting and say something before a year of budget pours into a hole. You don't set the strategy. You're the one who sees the crack first and raises the flag.
And Polaroid is the painful example of how this happens, because it was not ignorance. Polaroid's own labs saw digital coming. They understood the technology perfectly well. But the whole company, its factories, its profits, its identity, was built on selling a pack of film for every single shot. Digital threatened the exact thing that made them their money, so the leadership kept betting that instant print would stay king, and treated digital as a sideshow. The outside world went digital anyway. Their old rival Kodak got most of the headlines when it collapsed a decade later, but Polaroid went first, and for the very same reason. They saw the wave, and they defended the beach.
Wait, so they actually saw it coming and still got flattened by it?
They saw it and still got flattened, and that is the instructive part. It was not a knowledge problem, they knew. It was a watching and adapting problem. They watched the shift and chose to keep executing the old plan, because the old plan was comfortable and profitable, right up until it was not. That's the exam's whole warning about experience. The more successful your current way of working, the harder it is to believe the world is about to make it worthless. And that's the cruel twist this domain keeps testing. The very success that earns you the corner office is what makes you defend the thing that's quietly fading. On the exam, the seasoned, confident answer that protects the current plan is very often the wrong one.
And notice the shape here, because it's the same shape every time. A team that is genuinely good at its work, heads down, executing, delivering, while the environment quietly rewrites the value of what they're delivering. The danger isn't a lazy team. It's a great team pointed at yesterday's target. Effort doesn't protect you from that. Only looking up does.
And here's the cost that never shows up on a status report. When you stop watching, the bill doesn't arrive as a catchable line item. It arrives as the whole business, all at once. Polaroid's numbers looked healthy right up until the market underneath them was gone. That is the trap the exam dramatizes over and over. The cost of watching is always small in the moment. A little time each week, a few uncomfortable questions. The cost of not watching stays invisible, then arrives all at once, at the end, when it is too late to steer. So watching is not busy work. It is the cheapest insurance a project ever buys. So here's the mental model to carry through the episode. There are 2 ways a project can be doing well. It can be doing the work well, on time, on budget, meeting spec. And it can be doing the right work, building a thing the world still wants when it ships. Those are different questions, and a project can quietly pass the first one while failing the second. Task 8 is about never losing sight of the second question while you're buried in the first.
It's the difference between rowing hard and rowing toward the right island. You can have the fittest crew on the water and still land nowhere anyone wanted to go.
Exactly, Nova. And this is Task 8 of the Business Environment domain, Evaluate External Business Environment Changes. It is the last of the 8 business environment tasks, and that domain is now 26% of your exam, more than a quarter, up from just 8% on the old one. So this reflex, watching the outside world and adapting the project to stay valuable, is squarely in the fresh, high-value zone the new exam rewards. One quick, genuinely useful thing before we go deeper. Over at certs.professorerica.com, there are free practice questions and free flashcards, no sign-up, and the business environment set is full of exactly these "your project is fine but the world moved" scenarios. Run them right after this while it's fresh, because spotting the shift in a calm video and spotting it under exam pressure are 2 different skills. So sit with this one. You're a project manager, 6 months into a solid, on-track build. A competitor just launched something that does most of what your project will do, for free. Your project is still green on every metric. What's the very first thing you do? Because doing nothing and quietly panicking are both about to be wrong. Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe, and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it. To pressure test the external environment calls today, we've got Professor Castellano at the desk. He's here to help us stress every answer and find where the confident move is actually the wrong one. Professor Castellano, welcome.
Glad to be here. I'll happily lean on anything that sounds a little too clean.
So the first enabler PMI lists under Task 8 is survey changes to the external business environment. And the word survey matters. It doesn't say react, it says look, systematically, at the whole landscape. So the obvious question, Professor Castellano, when they say survey the whole outside world, where do you even point the telescope? What are you actually scanning?
There's a clean old framework for exactly this, and it long predates the exam. It's called PESSL. 6 lenses you sweep across the outside world so nothing hides in a blind spot. Political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. It came out of a 1967 Harvard book on scanning the business environment, and it survives because it's just a good checklist for looking outward. Each letter is a direction to point the telescope so you don't only stare at the one threat you already fear.
And notice the exam gives you its own short version of that list, right in the enabler. It names regulations, technology, geopolitical, and market as the examples. That maps almost one-to-one onto PESSL. A new regulation is the legal lens. A new technology is the technological lens. Geopolitical is political. Market is economic and social together. So if you remember nothing else, remember that the exam wants you scanning laws, tech, world events, and the market continuously.
And every one of those lenses points at something you do not control. In PMI's language, these are enterprise environmental factors, conditions not under the team's control that still constrain the project. A new law, a competitor's launch, an interest rate move. You can't veto any of them, and they don't care about your Gantt chart. The only power you have over one is to see it early. Surveying is how you buy that early warning, and early warning is the whole value because the same shift is cheap to absorb in month 2 and catastrophic in month 10.
Take the technology lens because it's the one that ends companies. Look at Nokia. In 2007, Nokia was the phone market. Roughly half of every mobile phone sold on Earth was theirs. Then Apple's iPhone arrived that same year, and the ground moved from buttons to a glass touchscreen with an app store. Nokia saw it. They just didn't believe it fast enough, and they were loyal to their own operating system. By 2013, their share of that market was a small single-digit number, and they sold the phone business off. Half the market to almost nothing, because they surveyed the technology lens and then argued with what they saw.
Wait, is it always technology though?
Great instinct to test, and no it isn't. Professor Castellano, take the economic lens.
Not at all, and that's exactly the blind spot trap. The economic lens bites just as hard, and it moves faster. Picture the crowd on Wall Street in 1929. Overnight, an economic shock like that can vaporize the demand a project was justified on, no technology change required. A downturn dries up the budget. An interest rate jump wipes out the returns that made the project worth doing. A currency swing wrecks a supplier's price. The economic lens can end a project on a Tuesday that looked perfectly healthy on Monday. The reason you scan all 6 is precisely because the one that gets you is usually not the one you were staring at.
Castellino just named the pattern. The threat you brace for isn't the one that lands. Scanning all 6 lenses is how you stop guarding one door while the other 5 are open.
And surveying is a habit, not an event. This is the part experienced people quietly skip. They did a solid environmental scan once, back during planning, put PESEL on a slide and then filed it and never looked again. But the environment didn't stop moving when planning ended. A scan you did 8 months ago is a photograph of a world that no longer exists. The tested project manager keeps a light, living watch on those lenses for the whole life of the project, so a shift shows up as a small note in a status review, not as a catastrophe at launch. And the practical version is boring on purpose. You put the external environment on the agenda of every status review as one standing question: has anything moved out there that touches us? And you keep a short living log of the shifts you're tracking. It's cheap, it's quiet, and it turns a nasty launch day surprise into an early line item you had months to handle.
I want the receipt on the enabler, not my paraphrase of it. Put the actual line PMI wrote on the desk.
Gladly. Let's put the real outline up because the wording is the lesson, especially one word at the end.
There it is in 3 lines. Survey the external environment. Assess and prioritize the impact on scope and backlog. Continually review it. Look, listen, and never stop. The whole task is those 3 verbs, and the last one, continually, is the one that separates the tested project manager from the one who did a scan once and called it done.
So a quick gut check before we go on. That old scanning framework we used, PESEL, how many separate lenses does it give you to point at the outside world? Don't overthink it, just the number.
4. Political, economic, social, technological. That's the one I remember.
That's the older PEST, and it's a great guess, so you're close. The fuller version is 6. They added the legal lens and the environmental lens, and both of those have become huge on the modern exam, because regulations and sustainability are now testable in their own right. Political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental. 6 directions. Now, you've scanned and you've spotted a real shift. What do you actually do with it? That's the next scene. So you surveyed, and you spotted a real change in the outside world. Now the second enabler, and it's the one that turns watching into managing. Assess and prioritize the impact on the project's scope and backlog. 2 verbs. Assess, meaning figure out what this actually does to your work. And prioritize, meaning decide how much it matters compared to everything else, because not every tremor is an earthquake.
That word prioritize is doing quiet, heavy lifting. The outside world produces 100 little signals a week. A rumor, a competitor tweak, a small rule change, a headline. If you replanned the project every time one arrived, you'd never build anything. So the skill isn't reacting to everything, it's triage. Which of these signals actually touches my scope, my schedule, my business case, and which are just weather? You sort the material shifts from the noise, and you spend your energy only on the ones that move something real. And the exam rewards exactly that. It'll hand you a scenario stuffed with a dozen distractions and one shift that genuinely threatens the scope or the business case. And the tested move is to name the one that matters and let the rest go by. Panicking at every headline fails that test just as surely as ignoring the real one. Honestly though, I'd push back on this whole domain a little. The external world is mostly noise. Chasing every headline and market wobble is how a project gets scope creep and never ships. The disciplined move is to lock your scope, put your head down, and deliver the plan you signed. Watching the news isn't project management.
Nova, that's a fair warning, and half of it is right, so let me split it. You're correct that replanning on every rumor is a real failure mode. The project manager who chases every tremor never finishes. But watching isn't the same as reacting. Task 8 isn't headline chasing, it's a disciplined filter, a light continuous scan that ignores the noise and flags only the material shifts. And here's the part your version misses. The project that actually fails is almost never the one that looked up too often. It's the one that never looked up at all, executing flawlessly toward a business case the world already erased. Borders, the bookstore chain, wasn't destroyed by watching the market too closely. So don't replan on noise, but never stop scanning, and when a real shift lands, route it through assessment instead of ignoring it. And when you do assess a real shift, here's the thing it can quietly hollow out: the business case. That's the justification the project was approved on, the reason it exists, usually some version of "we spend this much and get back that much value." Here's what experienced people forget. The business case is not carved in stone at kickoff. It's a living assumption, and an external shift can expire it right in the middle of the project while your status is still glowing green.
Wait, the business case can collapse while I'm still building it?
The dashboard is the last place it'll show up, because the dashboard measures the work, not the world. Your dashboard tracks: are we on schedule? Are we on budget? Are we building to spec? All green. It has no column for "is anyone still going to want this?" That's exactly what happened to Borders, the second largest bookstore chain in America. Every store metric could look healthy, while the reason people came to a bookstore at all was quietly moving online, to Amazon and to e-readers. By 2011, Borders had filed for bankruptcy, owing about $1.3 billion, and it closed all of its more than 1,000 stores. So when you spot a genuine external shift, you go back and ask the uncomfortable question out loud. Does the business case that justified this project still hold? Sometimes yes, and you carry on. Sometimes it's wobbling and you adjust. And sometimes it's gone.
And this is where you, the project manager, look genuinely impressive instead of just busy. Anyone can report a green schedule. Very few people raise their hand and say, "The schedule is green, and I still think we should stop."
So put real numbers on a case that collapsed, because it makes the abstract concrete. Imagine a project that was approved to earn about $1.2 million in value for a build cost of $800,000. Good deal, easy approval. Now, mid-project, the outside world moves. A competitor launches, a new regulation lands. Suddenly, the realistic benefit is only about $500,000. And to finish, you still have to spend. Let me total up what it now costs just to cross the finish line. The development still left to do is $450,000. The new regulation forces a compliance workstream you didn't plan, $200,000 more. And to match the competitor who just moved the goalposts, another $150,000 of rework. That's $800,000 just to finish, against a benefit that's now only $500,000.
So we'd be spending $800,000 to get back $500,000. That's setting money on fire to feel finished.
That's it exactly, and the sunk cost you already spent changes the math not one bit. What's spent is gone either way, like a train ticket you paid for whether you board or not. The only question left is forward, and forward, this project now destroys value. Yet the hardest thing in the room is to say so, because stopping feels like failing and the schedule is still green. This is the moment Task 8 exists for.
So when a real shift lands, you have a small menu of honest moves, and they scale with how hard the world hit you. If the case still basically holds, you rescope, adjust the requirements or the plan to keep the project valuable in the new reality. If it's shifted, you reprioritize, reorder the backlog so you deliver the parts that still matter first. And if the case is truly gone, like our 800 to earn 500 project, the right move is to recommend stopping it and free that money for something that isn't underwater. And every one of those moves has a name on the decision filter. Step 6, respect the process. You don't quietly rescope on your own authority, and you absolutely don't cancel a project by yourself. You take the impact assessment to the people who own the decision and route it through change control. Which is exactly the tension we should hand to the desk, because there's a very tempting wrong version of decisive here. Let's go pressure test it. So we've surveyed and we've assessed. Professor Castellano is back, because the last enabler is the one everyone underestimates, and it's where the whole task becomes a loop instead of a checkbox. And 2 exam drills to close. Professor Castellano.
Happy to. And the last enabler is one word doing all the work. Continually. Not once, not at planning, continually.
So the third enabler reads, continually review the external environment for impacts on scope and backlog. And that word turns Task 8 from a step into a cycle. You survey, you assess, you adjust, and then you go right back to surveying because the world you just adapted to is already changing again. There's no version of this where you finish scanning. The moment you stop, you're back to executing on a photograph of a world that's already moved.
And this is where Agile quietly has an advantage. A predictive project reviews the environment at big gates, so a shift can sit unnoticed between them. An Agile team reprioritizes its backlog every couple of weeks, so every sprint is a built-in chance to feed a new external reality into what gets built next. The shift you spotted on Monday is shaping the work by the next sprint. Same continual review, baked into the rhythm.
Here's the honest flip side of Polaroid. Think about Fujifilm. It made about 60% of its money the same way Kodak and Polaroid did, selling film, and the same digital wave hit all three at once. But Fujifilm read that shift and refused to only defend film. It went hunting for where its real strengths, its chemistry, and its material science could win in a world that no longer needed film. Same signal, a completely different response. All three saw the wave coming. Only one acted on what the survey showed.
And what Fujifilm did is the pattern worth naming. They took the chemistry they had perfected for film and pushed it into new markets, healthcare, advanced materials, even skincare, because the same science that keeps a photo from fading also slows skin from aging. The film business shrank, but the company did not shrink with it. Kodak bet on film and went bankrupt in 2012. Fujifilm bet on adaptation and is still a large, healthy company today. Same starting point, opposite ending, and the only variable was whether they adapted.
And here's why continual review pays off, drawn out. A business case doesn't usually collapse in one dramatic moment, it decays. The benefit that justified the project erodes, a slice at a time, as each external force takes a bite. Watch it happen.
So let me push the decisive version hard, because it's the tempting trap. If the environment shifted enough to hurt the project manager should just make the call, rescope it, or cancel it and move on. Waiting for a committee is exactly the slowness that lets a failing project limp along for another year. Be decisive. Pull the plug yourself.
That can't be right. Killing the project isn't the project manager's call to make.
Liam's instinct is exactly right. Here's the boundary the exam tests. Your job on Task 8 is to survey the shift, assess its impact, and recommend a course of action with the numbers behind it. But rescoping or terminating a project is a business decision, and it belongs to the sponsor and the governance body, routed through change control. A project manager who quietly cancels a project is acting above their authority. One who sees the case collapsing and stays silent has failed just as badly. The tested move is both decisive and governed. See it early, cost it honestly, recommend it clearly, and hand the decision to the people who own it.
So the boundary is see it and recommend, never freelance the cancellation.
Exactly that. You are the radar and the recommendation, not the executioner. Now let's drill it, exam style. First scenario, you're running a predictive project, and mid-build a new regulation lands that changes what your product is legally allowed to do. What's your best next action?
You assess the impact of that regulation on your scope, cost, and schedule, and you take it through the change control process as a recommendation. You do not just bolt on the compliance work quietly, and you do not ignore it and hope. You cost it, and you route it to the sponsor and the board. The regulation is an external factor you can't veto, so the only move is see it, size it, and process it.
Harder one, Agile project. Your product owner comes to stand up having seen a competitor launch a feature that makes half your backlog pointless. Do you?
You reprioritize the backlog. That's the whole point of Agile continual review. The external shift feeds straight into what the team builds next. The product owner reorders the backlog to drop or defer the work the competitor just made worthless, and pulls forward what still matters. You don't blow up the current sprint, and you don't keep building the pointless features on schedule just because they were planned. You let the survey change the queue. The tempting distractor is to finish the sprint as planned because the backlog was agreed. The whole value of a backlog is that it reorders when the world does.
Professor Castellano, that's the clearest anyone has drawn the see it and recommend line. Before you go, leave us the single line to walk out the door with.
Glad to help. Hold this and you'll never miss one of these. Your project lives inside a moving world, so you never stop watching it. Survey all 6 lenses, assess what a real shift does to the value, and recommend the move. Then let the owners decide. The project that fails is the one that stopped looking up.
And that's the last of the 8 business environment tasks, so the whole domain is done, a full quarter of your exam. Governance, compliance, change, impediments, risk, improvement, organizational change, and now the outside world. Put that together with the people and process domains, and you've walked the entire map the exam is built on.
But hold today's 2 ideas first. A project can be perfectly executed and still be worthless if the world moved under it, so watching the outside world is part of the job, not a distraction from it. And whatever the shift, your move is always the same shape. Survey it, assess the impact on scope and backlog, and recommend the adjustment, then route the decision through the people who own it. See it, size it, recommend it.
Honestly, Nova, this is the one that reframed the whole exam for me. It's not just do the work right, it's keep asking whether the work is still worth doing. That flip is going to change how I read every scenario.
If this finally made the business environment domain feel like real project management instead of vague business talk, subscribe, it genuinely helps us keep making these. And the free practice questions and flashcards are waiting at certs.professorerica.com. The business environment set is exactly where the fresh, high-value points are hiding on the new exam. Before you close the tab, one honest question. On a project you've run, was there a moment the outside world shifted and everyone kept building anyway, and what did that cost in the end? Tell us in the comments. Survey the whole world, size only what's real, and recommend the move, and the answer the exam wants stops being a guess. Catch you in the next one.